Welcome back to the Two Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett. Really quick before we get into today's episode, nice little second pod, like I told you in the intro, against in the Alex Golden podcast, talking about the Pascal Siakam trade. Joined today after about a year, about this time last year. I talked to Coleman Crawley. Looking forward to talking to him again at Sharpshot Select on all social media platforms. We talked about mid-majors ad nauseum, 50-plus minutes. I asked for 30. He gave me way more. Greatly appreciate his time as always. Good friend of the program. Good dude. So wanted to make sure we told you at the top, don't forget Two Pointers is the presenting sponsor with SeatGeek. Or SeatGeek is our presenting sponsor. You know what I mean if you've been around here. If not, code in the top of the description after all of Coleman's information. Go be sure to give him a follow. $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek.com or link in the top of the description. Takes you to the app. You'll be able to go in there and check out your score of your deal to make sure it's a really good deal for you. Make sure it's a good seat. Get a view of where you're sitting. SeatGeek's an incredible partner. We greatly appreciate their support. Code Two Pointers, TWOPOINTERS. It's $20 off that first purchase of SeatGeek.com. Greatly appreciate the support again from SeatGeek. Coleman was awesome. We talked, like I said, about mid-majors for plenty of time. So if you enjoy mid-major basketball, low-major basketball, even if you don't, this will give you some insight of some of the best teams that him and I have both seen, or him and I have both thought to be some of the best in the country at their level. So again, thank you to Coleman for dropping by, and enjoy the podcast. All right, as you heard in the intro, we're joined today by Coleman Crawley, making his return close to a year. I don't have the exact date in front of me, but at Sharpshot Select on social media. The person that I think when I thought this idea through, we had been talking about potentially doing a pod this year again, and mid-majors, especially something for me, I've spent more time on this year than ever before, going to a lot of CAA games. I was at UNCW Charleston, which was actually where this spurred the idea of like, okay, I've seen two of the most just dominant mid-major teams at their level, and it inspired me to think like, okay, how many are there out there that teams should really fear, which is where the idea came from. And so I reached out to you. I appreciate it on short notice. But first of all, welcome back. Thank you for being here, and introduce yourself to those that might not have checked out last year's when you were literally, I think you were in, it was somewhere in like the Maryland corridor there. It was like somewhere in the Midwest or
maybe Delaware.
Yeah, I think
I was
that's
in
it.
Delaware.
I think that's right. Yep. So somewhere, not from a hotel room this time, but introduce yourself, what you're doing, things like that.
Right, absolutely. So Coleman Crawley, as you can see, Sharpshot Select on Twitter and TikTok. I'm trying to find Cinderella before she's at the ball. So last year, starting on December 28th, I went to, between then to Selection Sunday, 100 college basketball games. Or I guess maybe it was after we had gotten through some of the tournament. 100 college basketball games in 81 days. Ended up going to a total of 106 by the end of the season. And, I got to see Furman several times before they then are able to knock off Virginia. I was able to watch Princeton twice. I didn't even anticipate Princeton being a Cinderella. And then they run to the Sweet 16. I mean, so often these Cinderellas aren't who we expect them to be when we pick these 12 or 13 seeds. Trying to find those Cinderella teams and trying to catch as much live college basketball as I can.
And a team that we actually went to a game together here in my area. We'll get to them today because I think they're on the group master list that I have in front of me. We'll get to it. People will know if they saw the content from last year. So
Right.
I'll lay out a few, like, not ground rules, but just things for the listeners to keep up with. I already explained all of it to you. So really quick, we excluded, or when I made this master list, when I reached out to you, I excluded the Mountain West because, in my opinion, they're a power conference this year. To kind of give context to that, I'm surprised that the Pac-12 ranks ahead of them in the net currently with only three teams from the Pac-12 making it as of right now, and then 5, even 6 potentially from the Mountain West. But somehow the net has number 1 Big 12, number 2 Big 10, number 3 SEC, 4 Big East, 5 ACC, 6 Pac-12, and 7 Mountain West. So basically, all these other teams, for the general sake of the idea, are considered mid-majors, which is why I wanted to go through them. For the ease of the listener, like I told you before, we're going to go through just a few in a row here of conferences. We won't spend forever on it. The ultimate goal when people are listening to this is you're going to want to hear the master list at the end, because there's the 10 that I feel the strongest about. And then obviously somebody like you who does this and covers this extensively we should be in agreement in a lot of those. It's just a matter of maybe I'm too low on a team, maybe you're too high on a team. I don't know. We'll figure it out. So for the listeners at home, I compiled the ones I'm going to start reading in just a second are ones that I feel like either that I've watched and I felt good about, the record stands for itself, some of the stats back it up, whatever the case may be, or I've seen them in person. So we'll go through kind of making it easier on the listener. The America East is first. Always catches me off guard that it's not the American East, but like straight on their website, it says America East. Throws me off. I don't really understand that, but whatever. The American, which is, FAU, Memphis, SMU, those kinds of teams, and then the A10. We're going to start with those three in the A's to make it a little easy. For the America East, I have UMass Lowell in Vermont. So one of those two gets an AQ. I don't think that's a league that obviously would get two in, of course. The American, I have FAU, SMU, and Memphis. And then the A10, I have Dayton and George Washington. So any on there surprise you, or any that I'm missing, or anything you'd like to comment on to kind of get us moving here?
Yeah, I would say the America East, Bryant, is a team that I personally think is going to be the automatic qualifier. Now, I did think they were going to be last year, and then they went 500. But Grosso's gone after the incident and then stepping down, and is Phil Martelli Jr., and this team, I watched them once at home last year against UMBC. They seem to not be together whatsoever. They did bring in a whole lot of transfers, honestly had too much talent to where guys seemed pissed off that they weren't getting the minutes or the opportunity or the ball as much as they expected. This year, with two of those key players having left, I think now their talent pool is better suited with them having, 6 super talented guys rather than 8 in the past. They brought in Connor Withers at a UMass Lowell that's been super helpful for them. I think Bryant could win the America East. That was the team that you left off that I think they're right there in that trio. And then in the American, I'm not a believer really in George Washington. James Bishop is very nice, but I think there's a laundry list of other teams that I would put before them. It's Dayton's league. It's Dayton's league right now, and everyone else is behind them. But gosh, Richmond, St. Joe's, St. Bonaventure, VCU, George Mason. I'm still a believer in Duquesne long term, even though they're winless right now. Loyola Chicago, like the A10 is just so deep. There's really just 4 teams that I don't love: St. Louis, Fordham, who else? Rhode Island, and then LaSalle. Other than that, those other 10 that are behind Dayton, I mean, the A10 tournament in Brooklyn is going to be so much fun because I think 2 to 11 is really, really balanced.
I like that answer. So thinking about to be clear to the listeners, I just picked one team outside of Dayton because the only way the A10 gets multiple bids, probably, I'm not a bracketologist, but I don't see them being a multiple bid league unless somebody wins or makes a run with a good conference slate like a top team that you already mentioned. I just picked George Washington because I've seen enough. I like some of the talent there. It really is Dayton's league to lose, and they'll still get in. So I think that's really just nice. I like the context there, though.
They never win the A10 tournament, so this year I hope they don't, because I'd love for the A10 to be a multiple bid league. Yeah, right now Richmond pretty much the only hope with them being undefeated right now. I think they're the highest rated KenPom team. I don't know about the net. That maybe they could rip off a run and get in that large berth, but the A10 probably needs Dayton to lose it to get multiple bids.
100%. You did make a good point about Bryant looking more into it. They're 8th in the country in effective field goal percentage defense, top 100 in KenPom defense, 3rd fastest tempo adjusted in the entire country, which is really fast. Did it seem like
Love
that?
To play quick.
They do. They still seem fast. Okay, so that's you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They were without Sharif Gross-Bullock, who's their leading scorer, about 18 a game. The game that I saw him and still beat a good Towson team without him. So yeah, you plug him in. I really like that Bryant team.
They rattled off. You just said it. Towson in double overtime. Drexel they beat, who's I believe still unbeaten as of recording this in the CAA. That can change tonight. They beat FAU. They beat a couple other teams on this list that I won't spoil. All right, quickly on the American, because we didn't really touch on the American there. I guess I'll make it easy for the American, because FAU is the pretty pick, right? Experienced group, return basically everyone. Dusty May, all the stuff we know about them already, regardless of the quad four losses. Memphis has kind of, the last two games there. I know South Florida's coached really well, and whatever, right? I can't remember the other loss, but I threw in SMU because of a couple of reasons. Number one in the country in 3-point defense. They hold their opponents to 26% from the three. Like that changes a March Madness game entirely, right there. Like you hold your opponent, whoever it is, they don't have to be a great 2-point shooting team. If you completely neutralize that, that's a problem for the other team. They played a really tough non-con. They lost a lot of these though, but lost to Texas A&M, Wisconsin, and Dayton. So all teams that are right now in the field or could be in the field very easily. Second in opponent effective field goal percentage per game at 41%. So not only are they holding them to 3-point defense low, they're also holding them from the field very low. And then they're 84th in KenPom offense and 15th in KenPom defense. So they're getting hot at the right time. And all of that speaks to a team. If they're in the tournament, they're not going to be fun to play. So I guess my question is, SMU, if you have anything on them, that's great. But I guess out of FAU, Memphis, and then throw in SMU, who do you think has the highest potential to go the furthest? I guess would be the way I would handle the American.
Gosh, that's a great question. Even though I don't really trust them, I'm going to say SMU because of their defense. This was a team that preseason I picked 8th in the American out of 14 teams. They went 5-13 and got 10th last year in the American when it was an 11-team league. So Rob Lanier in his second season doing a great job with this team. Chucky Harris has been a big reason why at the point guard position coming over from Butler. They added some nice transfers, but I love a team that their focal point is on the defensive end of the floor. When you're top 15 in the country as a mid-major on the defensive end, that gives you a chance. Think of, Loyola Chicago and their runs. They were elite on that end of the floor. So I like SMU the best because Florida Atlantic, as much as, they would be the easy pick with them having made the run to the Final Four last year, they are not as committed on the defensive end of the floor as they were a year prior. They were, great stoppers on that end, and you're not seeing the commitment, it seems, this season, playing to their competition a lot. So I'm going to go a little bit of a surprise pick, but say SMU there of that bunch.
Look, I'm not surprised. At least I'm not, because putting this research together, watching them a couple of times, they're legit. Like I think if they get in. And I think they don't have a chance right now. I know some bracketologists, there's so many out there. I have seen them where they're like in the first 8 out, like that 6 to 8 whatever range. So not the first 4 out, but the next 4 out. They have a chance. If they continue this American run that they're on, I know Charlotte's still at the top for a myriad of different reasons. I pulled them up. I still think, if I had to just kind of give you an answer really quick, I do still think FAU, just because I watched that team last year a couple times, and you and I both were in Houston for that, that heartbreaker. Goodness gracious.
Right.
That heartbreaker they're one San Diego State shot away from being in the national championship game against UConn. I don't know if that changes the result or not. I'm not a
dark horse though in the American before we conclude. Tulane.
Love that. Yep.
They've got, in my opinion, not a deep enough bench for as fast a tempo as they play. I'd love to see them give in one way or the other. Either you've got to add another guy to the rotation, or you've got to slow it down just a little bit. It really hurts them on the defensive end. But they have so many offensive weapons. Forbes, Cross are really nice mid-major pieces that if they get hot, as offensive-oriented as they are, in the American tournament, I would love to see Coach Hunter's team get to the NCAA tournament, but they are a class below those 3 that you mentioned, and maybe even North Texas.
Look, I had I did not believe in the dip. I didn't know we were going to spend this much time on the American, but I got to see North Texas this year at Charleston for the Charleston Classic, and the most physically dominating team I've ever seen that's not Houston, who was also in that tournament. So
really?
I was super
that's a huge compliment.
Just the eye test of them, and I sat under one of the baskets. So to see some of the physicality stuff that you might not see if you're sitting on the sideline or if you're sitting anywhere else, it was just the perfect vantage point to see how good. Ross Hodge, incredible coach, and I wish him all the best for that. So to give
Mm-hmm.
you a closing point on the American, I picked SMU before the season to finish 12th. So look, I'm willing to eat my crow. This is also really good ammo for when if SMU does the run that we think they could, if they get in the tournament, this is recorded evidence that we believed in them, and I think that's good for their future. So, all right,
The metrics love them.
They do, and I look again. The stats back them up too. So, all right, let's go through a couple of small conferences quickly, like I would call mid to low major.
Mm-hmm.
I have in the ASUN, we're going to go in alphabetic order just to make things easier so we can get to the power rank. ASUN, Big Sky, Big South, we'll hit and Big West. We'll hit those quickly because I don't have a ton. In the ASUN, I have this weird logjam. I'll start with the logjam. It's Eastern Kentucky, Kennesaw State, and Lipscomb. There's 2 out of those 3 I feel really good about. The Big Sky, I have Weber State, or Weber State, however you pronounce it, because I don't really know who the heck's going to win that league, so I just picked the team with the best player, I think, out of that, with Dylan Jones. They're incredible on the offensive glass as well. The Big South is between UNC Asheville and High Point. Obviously, Winthrop could go through and win that tournament. Longwood could. I think there's a lot of people that could. But if in terms of teams that get in that we believe in, it's probably those 2, at least from a talent standpoint and from a everything we've seen standpoint. And then the Big West, I picked UC Santa Barbara because of a lot of different reasons we can go into. So I guess out of the ASUN, Big Sky, Big South, Big West, anything, I think we're probably in pretty close agreement there. I think the ASUN's probably the weird one, though.
The Big West, I disagree with you there. I've got UC Irvine, UC Santa Barbara. Man, just for whatever reason, they don't look like the same team that they were last year that, tied first place in this conference. Maybe it's losing Miles Norris. I don't know. But I think they're 500 right now in the Big West. And that's a league where 6-7 teams could win it. I think the Big South is similar, where, High Point is having a massive advantage that it's no longer at Bojangles, the Big South tournament. It's at High Point, which I feel like is crazy unfair. But that's one where maybe six of those 9 teams could win it. You throw in Gardner-Webb, Radford, Longwood, Winthrop with those top 2 that you named. I love leagues like that, Horizon, SoCon, where you've got several teams that it looks like can win, and those are 2 conferences that you named that are like that. The ASUN, I think it's Eastern Kentucky. It's weird. They had such a poor non-conference, but now they're hitting their stride in conference play. I think it's Eastern Kentucky that's a class above everyone else. And then the 2 that you mentioned are who I'd put at 2 and 3, Kennesaw and Lipscomb. And then did you name one more conference?
The Big Sky.
Big Sky,
I went with Weber State because I was like, Dylan Jones. I mean, he gets in the tournament. He's good enough to carry them to a victory. I believe in him.
I completely agree with you. That's who I would take too. Yeah. But right now they're 3 and 4 in Eastern Washington and Montana are looking really good. But I would still agree with you. Best player, neutral court tournament. Give me Dylan Jones and Weber State.
Yeah. The only 2 I think I would quickly comment on, and we keep rolling. The Big West, I know UC Santa Barbara. I just believe in Ajay Mitchell, Johan Traore, Cole Anderson shooting 44.6% from 3 on 6.7 attempts. Like, just a ridiculous nuclear weapon there. So I think if they can get into a flow right now, like late January, early February, if you don't get put your foot to the pedal, it can really hurt you, especially in a tournament like that where you, like you mentioned, there's a lot of really good teams there. It's obviously not going to be an easy path, but I think they have the talent. If they get in, that's probably the team I feel good about.
Traore has got to be the most common name of a forward in college basketball.
I know.
There are Traores everywhere.
I mean, and soccer too. I mean, it's such a big name in soccer overseas. Yeah. Obviously, he had some opportunity at Auburn. I know that they're an offensive juggernaut. 77th in points per game, 81st in offensive rebound. There's a ton of other stats that are even better than that. I just didn't want to spend forever on them. The only team I'll throw in there from the ASUN that I feel good about is Lipscomb. Talked to Coach Acuff a few weeks ago on the Everything College Basketball podcast. Incredible coach. I believe in that guy. The 5-out fast Princeton concept, it's not really an offense. It's just like somebody's always moving if the 5's in a certain spot. He described it very well. I like the fact that if they get in, their defense definitely needs some work, and he admitted that. But like if they play like a Kansas who can't shoot sometimes on a bad night, like and they aren't prepared for how fast they are, like Kevin McCullough might be, I could just see a problem for a team like Kansas. Now lately they're starting to look good. Furphy obviously had a great game the other night, but Lipscomb, I think, could catch somebody like Kansas off guard if they get a 2. Like, if they get 215, Lipscomb would, like, completely throw somebody off, like kind of like Princeton did last year. So,
I mean, I love a team that brings back continuity. And, they brought back their 4 leading scorers from a year prior. And just when you play together for several years, you tend to figure each other out, have good chemistry, and typically that leads to success. The ASUN regular season is going to be huge because that's one of the few conferences where you get home court advantage based on your regular season standing. So how Eastern Kentucky, Kennesaw, Lipscomb, how those couple, and then you can even look at North Florida, Stetson maybe, how those teams shake out will be huge for who's getting home court advantage come early March.
All right. To my favorite league, the league I've covered the most now, we'll hit CAA, Conference USA, and we'll stick with those two because I think there's some depth there. So I'll make the CAA really easy for everyone. It's Drexel, UNCW, Charleston, and Towson. Those are the 4, no matter what, that I think have a contention to beat somebody in March. Now, can somebody below there, can they win this conference? Absolutely. Right? I left it with like, if I believe in these 4, this is who I had. The reason is because, like I said at the beginning, this stemmed from I was at UNCW Charleston, most incredible mid-major environment I've ever been a part of, and some of the best hospitality. I appreciate everybody there. I walked away from that game and I wrote the very last line in my recap. I said my takeaway from this game is not anything to do with the game. It's going to be a shame that one of these 2 teams is going to not be in March Madness, Charleston and UNCW. So. I think let's stick with the CAA. No, you're good. Stick in the CAA. That's it. Who's your favorite out of that group?
Well, I'll stick with what you said before. What you said is absolutely right. It's a travesty, and I don't think it's just the 4 that you mentioned. In terms of winning a game or being an upset team, I'd agree those 4. I would add one more to it, Hofstra. Yep. When you've got 2 guys, Dubar and then Tyler Thomas, that combine for like 41, 42 a game, both of them top 50 scorers in the country, with I think Tyler Thomas is sitting at 6th. That's a problem when if you're an opponent, you may not have the best 2 players on the floor. Think of like ORU in their run when they had O'Banner and Abe Smith. When you see those duos like that, sometimes that's tough to stop. So I would, even though they're off to a slow start and you got to see them against Campbell, I would still throw them in. And then Delaware is another team that I think could throw a wrench in things with those other top 5, but maybe not pull off a win in the tournament. Who I like the most, gosh, I mean, it's such a cluster. I think I'm going to go with Drexel with the continuity that they brought back with, having the big Amari Williams. He's so huge for them. Shot blocker, steal. I mean, just one of the best defensive players in the country. Justin Moore, another good guard for them as well. And they have such balanced scoring. I'm going to go with Drexel. I just don't think Charleston is the team that they were last year. But with as much as they love the 3, if they're hot, you're going to have a tough time beating them. That tournament in D.C. is going to be a ton of fun.
I hope to be there. I agree with you on Hofstra, Delaware. I didn't put them in there just because I think it's an uphill climb with those 4. I think a little bit. Delaware may be the lesser of the 2. Hofstra, I did see that game. That was a huge win for Campbell. There was just some adjustment stuff there. I actually was supposed to talk to Coach Claxton. It didn't work out. Frustration. I walked in on a meeting I wasn't supposed to. There's a lot that happened there that I will not go any further on that comment.
Oh, man.
But Hofstra, I do think that, I think they just got so reliant on Thomas. And obviously Dunbar, he had 20 plus in that game. There were some things there that I saw that I think were good. That I think they're starting to learn from that. They're starting to play a little bit more team ball now. That win against Stony Brook, I think at Stony Brook, you were just there, were you not? So that was a huge momentum shift for them. Mm-hmm. I went with UNCW. That was the whole reason, and I'm not letting the hospitality or the students, I'm not letting any of that cloud my judgment. Just a couple of things for those that might not know. Super deep team. They beat Charleston without going in deep in their bench. They have one of the best bench scoring units in the country. I think top 8 going into the Charleston game. They don't turn the ball over. They had 4 turnovers in the Charleston game. They're in the top 10 in the country in turnovers, unless that's changed. Coach Siddell's awesome, and then they have a go-to player in Trezarian White that if you need a bucket, even though he struggled in the first half against Charleston, he can get it done. So, not to mention he was, they could have lost that game because of him not shooting very well, but they had, 2 guys that were really good that day. So, I don't know. UNCW is not my favorite now, but it's going to change 5 times. Even Towson, talking about the continuity, some of those guys that came back are really good. They are really young. Charleston, they Ryan Larson and Dalton Balone or Balon or however you say his name are big losses, but they play hard, incredibly hard.
To your UNC Wilmington pick, I don't hate it at all. I'm a big believer in I guess hardships happening the year before, and then when you bring back continuity, overcoming those the next year. Think of Virginia. I think Purdue could be set up to do that this season. UNC Wilmington last year had a 7-point lead under 7 minutes to 8-point lead, maybe under 7-8 minutes to go in the CAA championship and just collapsed late to Charleston. Bringing back their top 4 scorers, all that continuity. I wouldn't be shocked if memories of that propel them, to a CAA title and winning it this time.
All right. I knew we'd spend a lot of time on the CAA, so definitely good stuff. If you want to check out more CAA content, you've got plenty of it up, and then I've got a bunch of recaps from games I've been to, so people can check those out. So quickly on Conference USA, Louisiana Tech, Western Kentucky, and Liberty. I assume there's no one else. I assume it's one of those 3, and 30 seconds, who is it out of those 3?
Liberty.
Really? Okay. We're in agreement there. They're not the top of the conference right now, but we're complete agreement there. Wow.
I think they're going through a lull right now. They had an incredible November, tougher December and start to January. But yeah, I think it's La Tech and Liberty that are the 2 teams to me, even though they're not at the top of the standings right now. I think eventually by the end of it, they will be. And I really like Liberty, even without Darius McGee. Outside of him, they brought essentially everyone else back. So love the continuity from that team. And I think you could almost make the argument that Conference USA might be a little bit easier than the Atlantic Sun, in just that there's just not the volume of teams up at the top like there is in the Atlantic Sun. There were 5 or 6 that Liberty would have to worry about if they were in that conference. I only think there's a couple in Conference USA.
I think their jump to Conference USA and then Conference USA's shellacking of teams, like just getting rid of teams left and right, I think was good for them. I think it's going to allow them to create this resume almost year over year. Coach McKay's incredible. Got a chance to talk to him a few weeks ago.
Absolutely.
They loaded up. I mean, people can call it artificial, but they loaded up their non-con. Like, some people say, like, okay, you tried to put yourself in adverse positions, but I've heard that argument. I think that was good for them. They played Alabama, Charleston, FAU. Like, even though they got
prepare you for March.
Thrashed. They got thrashed by Alabama, but I think that's good for them, right? Sometimes it's good to take the beating. So, all right, we'll hit these next couple ones quickly. Horizon is one of those leagues. I didn't cover it in the ECB magazine this year, but the guy that did was like, look, there's 6 teams coming into the year that like any of them could win, and I'd really like any of them. I wrote down Oakland and Youngstown State. Oakland's definitely the best team right now. Win over Xavier, 7-2 in the Horizon. Trey Townsend's an incredible defender. I have Oakland right now, but I also have Youngstown State. Quickly, is there anybody that, like, obviously it's all those teams. Like, I think the top 6 is incredible, but is there anybody that you feel strongly about?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the year, I thought there were 5 teams that could win it, and it was a toss-up. Now I think there's 8. I think it's extended down to 8. I mean, Green Bay's having an incredible year. What a turnaround from being one of the worst teams in the country. I like Wright State. Again, I talked about a duo, Hofstra having a duo, Trey Calvin, Tanner Holden having come back. That duo can combine for 40 on any given night. They don't defend a soul, but they can outscore just about anybody. I like Wright State with that duo, but it could be anybody in the Horizon. Love the balance of that league.
If it's not, and I'm going to write State down just so I can recap it later so we can get to this power ranking. I don't want to hold you too long. So if it's not Princeton, it's who?
In Ivy, I think Cornell.
Me too. All right.
I really like Cornell.
No real waste there. I figured we got that.
Yeah.
Really quick on Princeton, 20th in KenPom offense, super efficient scoring team. Limit turnovers, very similar to UNCW in that regard. They have one loss, and they have an incredible player in Xavier Lee. I think that's their case right there. They're just no
They're
one's going to
so
beat
good.
them. So,
Love the three ball, and God, they're good at shooting it.
the winner of Princeton Cornell, I think they play. I don't have that right in front of me. I think they play very soon. The winner of that game might have 111 points. It's just like they both just they're not going to stop each other. So it's going to be interesting there. The next couple, I don't really think there's much argument on, but I'm just curious for the MAAC, the MAC in the Northeast. You've seen them more than I have, and a lot of others have. Is it Quinnipiac?
I think it's Iona. I know
Really,
they
still?
just lost. I know they just lost at Quinnipiac. I know they're 3-4 right now, but they're improving. And man, defensively, they apply a ton of pressure that it's just tough to go a full 40 minutes without Iona going on a 6-8, 10-0 run. And they almost beat Quinnipiac on the road, led for it seemed like 38 minutes in that game. But Quinnipiac is pretty nice. Watch them at Marist, and I do like them. Belonk, he's a really good player. But I think Iona might win that league.
Okay. It just seems like Quinnipiac is starting to separate themselves at the right time, which may be important for momentum because that tournament, you need the momentum. It's just one of the hardest tournaments of that level. MAC, I have Akron, top 100 in both KenPom offense and defense. I didn't really see any other team. Bowling Green's got a good record, but I didn't see any other team I felt strongly about.
They're head and shoulders. They're head and shoulders better than everyone else in that league.
That game, I think, I don't have it in front of me, but the Sun Belt MAC Challenge, I think they're playing one of the other top teams. I think it's JMU. That's going to be an incredible game.
Oh, that's awesome.
In a minute.
Yeah.
I'm 99% sure it's JMU. I'll look it up in a second. MEAC, I don't care that Howard's 8-12. When you have three players named Shai Odom, Seth Towns, and Marcus Dockery, that you have three of the best players in the conference on one team. They obviously were in there last year. They also solid three-point shooting team and free throw rate. Defense is not great, but they also played a tough non-con. They played JMU, Cincinnati, and some others. So any thoughts there on Howard?
I picked Howard in the preseason. I would still probably pick Howard now, but North Carolina Central, Norfolk State might be right there, and then Delaware State was the only team with a ton of continuity. I went to watch them last year, and the only reason I put them on the schedule is they had a chance to break the record for most consecutive D1 losses. It was going to be 43 straight. They ended up winning just before that, and since then, I mean, Stan Waterman, the job he's done at this program has been exceptional. And just for the feel-good story, I'd love to see Delaware State win that league.
Love it. All right, let's keep rolling. MVC, Indiana State, Drake, and Bradley. Those are the three I think are head and shoulders above. I understand Drake and Bradley, but Indiana State's incredible. Not really a question for you, but just, I mean, they're ridiculous.
They are. I mean, three guys averaging 15 plus. One of them Swope averaging 20. All three of those guys shooting 42+% from three. That's pretty difficult to guard.
Great coach. 5-out offense. 5 starters averaging 10 points per game, at least last time I looked. Number 1 in the country in three-point rate. Number 1 in three-point percentage. If they're cold, they still can beat you, but it's going to be tougher for them. But if they're on, the opponent's screwed. Just without a doubt. I'm trying to figure out that seed range. I think Drake last year was a 12 against Miami, if I got it right. So,
because of the way they play, they're going to be a nightmare to see in the tournament if they get in. And, I mean, as strong as the Missouri Valley's looking, at least the depth in it, they've got a chance to be a multi-bid league and maybe even as many as 3. If Indiana State and Drake can dominate in the regular season, and someone else can come through. Where they are at the metrics is borderline at large worthy, Indiana State and Drake.
I think the bid stealer that I'll be watching in that conference tournament, and I'll have the guys from ECB will be there because that's an incredible tournament. They said they're going to be there. Bradley is I think the team that could do it. Top 75 in both KenPom defense and offense, 75th and 74th respectively. OVC, Morehead State. I feel like there was a gap. I just went with Morehead State there.
Big gap, yeah.
Okay.
Head and shoulders.
Good, so agreeance there. All right, and then we'll be quick on the last couple so we can get to the ranking here. So, SoCon, a conference we both love and is near and dear to our hearts.
My favorite in college basketball.
Samford, UNC Greensboro and Western Carolina right now I have as the three that if they got in, I wouldn't be shocked if they won a game. And I'm going to save most of my comments on a lot of these teams for those that didn't know the story I alluded to earlier. Super Bowl Sunday last year, I decided to come join you at UNC Greensboro against Wofford. Incredible game, went into overtime. I ended up missing like half the first quarter driving back home. It was just an incredible game to go to. They did not cover, if I remember correctly.
No.
Unfortunately, because that was a big thing there. But Samford, UNC Greensboro, Western Carolina, who do you feel the best about?
Geez, I mean, the biggest question mark to me, I could even throw Furman in there, but I do agree with you. I think they're just a step below. But biggest question mark to me is who's healthy, who's playing in the SoCon. For Furman, they've been without several of their guys multiple times. Their three leading scorers. For Samford, it's Jermaine Marshall. I know they've continued to dominate. They've got the longest win streak going in college basketball, but in order to be a team that could win the SoCon tournament and then perhaps win tournament games, they're going to need Jermaine Marshall healthy and playing. So if they get him healthy, I'd say Samford. If they don't, I like Western Carolina with what they brought back. And I think Woolbright is he the best stat sheet stuffer in the country? 21, 12, and 6 or something like that. He's unbelievable how he impacts the game. Jackson, Jones. I love that Western Carolina team.
I would go with. Actually, I'm going to save my thoughts. I already said that, so let me save my thoughts there. But I love the Western Carolina pick. Great coach there too. Experienced coach who played really good college basketball in his day. We'll rattle off the last three because then we'll get to the power ranking, and I'll mention why. Southland, McNeese State. I don't think there's any competition there. I think if they lose, I'm not saying there's a chance they get in, but I just don't see them losing in their conference tournament. Anything can happen, but 17-2, Will Wade, great offense. Defense that's getting better over the last 5 to 10 games, and then they're 6th in the nation at three-point shooting. I just don't. It is what it is. Last two of my favorites. Sun Belt. Love the Sun Belt. I was at App State Auburn. That upset was incredible. One of my 2 or 3 court storms this year. By the way, how many court storms have you seen this year?
Yeah. Oh, geez. None. Yeah.
No? Really? I know mid-major doesn't happen as much, but UNC.
No, yeah, the games I'm going to, I haven't seen a court storm ever.
Okay. That's true. Like the MAAC on a Friday night, maybe not as much. Yeah, maybe. Okay. Yeah. Fair. App State, James Madison, we'll get into it when we get into the power ranking because I'm sure we'll probably disagree a little, but just something to talk about there. And then the WAC. Is there anybody not named Grand Canyon that if they get in, you'd like, I like that team?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I mean, in terms of challenging Grand Canyon in the WAC, Seattle, SFA, I think could. But no, I don't think there's another team that go and I feel confident about potentially winning a tournament game.
All right. Don't want to keep. I know we're over our time, so I want to be quick here.
No, you're good. You're good.
Let's roll into the top 10 because I'd love to know. I didn't ask you to put together one, so this is more picking mine apart. And I love that we went through all the teams first because now I have a general idea of where you're probably going to be. There's no way for you to on the fly. You could try it if you'd like, but I just want you to pick it apart or kind of go through it. So
again, I got you.
Recapping for the listeners, I excluded Dayton, FAU, and Memphis, and SMU, I guess, just sheer conference reasons because of seed lines. Because if SMU bid steals, they probably still get the 8 seed, 9 seed range, maybe 10. I just don't see that. I don't think they'd be penalized by the committee at that point. So just know that those 4 would obviously take up 4 spots on this list if it wasn't. So I was basically aiming, like I said at the top, for 10 seed up, right? So I'll start with honorable mentions. McNeese State, Drexel, Drake, High Point, and Akron were all teams that I wouldn't be shocked if they win a game, maybe even 2. But again, I tried to put together a top 10 of I can take this top 10 after the season's over and go, this is why they were on there. So McNeese, Drexel, Drake, High Point, and Akron. I already know which one you disagree with the most. It's Drexel because we already talked about it. They're the number 1 team in the CAA. You made a great case for them. So any surprises on the honorable mentions?
No. I think those are, fine honorable mentions. Akron is a team that I love. Now, how much are they going to be challenged in the MAC? The MAC is really down this year. A lot of key players left in that league from a season ago. But Akron's a team with, getting in Ali, getting his waiver approved, Enrique Freeman, a double-double monster. I wouldn't want to be seeing this Akron team in the tournament.
I guess your case for them, I laid it out a little bit when I did the stats late last night. I guess I did them before Kim Pom updated them. They were top 100 in both when I mentioned it. They're now 103 in Kim Pom offense, 86 in defense, so whatever, close enough. They did, you mentioned how they might not be challenged much in the MAC. They played in a row. They played Utah State, Drake, and UNLV. All 3 losses. 3-point loss to Utah State, which is could have gone either way. 20-point loss to Drake. Okay, maybe. And then UNLV, they only lost by 2. So 2 neutrals in a way there. And then they played St. Bonaventure and Gardner-Webb as well back-to-back later in non-con. So they have played teams that have challenged them, but just not recently, which I think you make a great point for there. All right, number 10. I'll give you 2 or 3. Number 10, I have Charleston. Number 9, I have Samford. And number 8, I have App State. So I guess the comment-worthy thing would be that we didn't talk about the Sun Belt, or I didn't. I kind of grazed over. I think App State's incredible. I got to see that team against Auburn where it was this grind it out, slow it down game. And just they beat Auburn at their own game, which obviously I know Auburn likes to play fast, don't get me wrong, but they have the shot makers if it needs to be that way. Obviously going up against one of the best coaches in the country there for Coach Kearns. But App State, Samford, Charleston, 8, 9, and 10. Anything there?
No, I like those. App State, I haven't got an opportunity to watch very much of, but yeah, they're definitely James Madison's biggest challenger for winning that league. Samford, I love if Jermaine Marshall's healthy. I just have a tough time seeing that team, a team that lost in the first round of the SoCon tournament last year, lose their 3 leading scorers and then be better. That's if Jermaine Marshall isn't playing. If he does play, though, man, they play the fastest tempo in the country, or about. They turn you over. I love that Samford. And Bucky McMillan, I got to interview 61 coaches last year, all having a lot of success at the mid-major level. And Bucky McMillan stuck out to me the most of those 6. And it was great names, Matt Langle. And not to be disparaging of those other guys, they were extremely impressive as well. Andy Kennedy, Casey Alexander at Belmont. But Bucky McMillan and how he's developed that program and the belief that he instills in his players, I mean, they'd run through a wall for him. I love Samford and what he's doing at that program.
Look, I thought about, when I watched them a few weeks ago, they were playing Western when, I don't remember, somebody had 35. I can't remember his name right now. But, I thought back to that interview, and I thought back to the conversation we had about Samford last year. So, I agree with you there. I almost feel like they're too low, but I've seen a lot of these other teams ahead enough that I just, somebody had to be penalized by the list. And then quickly, Charleston, I respect Coach Kelsey too much. I just do. The amount of crap that he had to hear at UNCW that last weekend, I was like, oh my God, this guy, his composure, even though he didn't on the court with some of the people have seen the video by now, just that you've been really bad, kind of comments at the ref.
Yeah.
So I respect him enough that I could not be left off the list, even if I do think that they might not even get there because of what they've lost. Again, I mentioned Larson and all that stuff. So, all right, really quick. UC Santa Barbara, excuse me. Number 6, UNC Greensboro, a team that I didn't comment on much. I'd like to talk about Princeton. Those are my next 3. So UC Santa Barbara 7, UNC Greensboro 6, and number 5, Princeton. I didn't comment on the SoCon much because I knew we would get to it in the top 10. I have, kind of your Western Carolina point, I do have UNC Greensboro as the team because if they get in, Mikhail Browns-Jones took up a huge step. And when you talk about guards in March, we saw them last year. The Langley brothers weren't getting worse year to year. That's just not happening, right? So when they have a guy that's that incredible a defender who's taken steps offensively, and then you have this player of the year, somebody reached out to me a few weeks ago, I believe it was, and somebody asked me who's in the NBA scouting world and I trust, and I was very surprised by this question. He's like, do you think, and I think it was Keyshawn they were referring to, they were like, do you think he's a 10-day contract guy? And I was like, 100% I think he's a 10-day contract guy in the NBA. And, just those 2 kind of guys, those 3-headed, monster there, their experience, they've beat good teams this year. I just don't know how they wouldn't beat a team like we saw them do against Arkansas, albeit Arkansas's not in the tournament right now, obviously.
No, it's a shame that those 4 teams, only one of them is going to be going to the NCAA tournament in the SoCon. I would think that, in my opinion, Greensboro and Santa Barbara, that'd be high for my list. But with that trio that you mentioned, MBJ taking a big step up. He's so athletic, such a force. And then the Langley brothers just pass defensively and set up the offense for everyone else. I do really like UNC Greensboro, but I just like Western Carolina and Samford just a little bit more.
Love it. Again, this is supposed to be a thing that you picked apart, so I appreciate the honesty with you. I realize now after we've talked it out, I'd love to redo this list sometime in the next couple of months and just see it right through the tournament, because I could see how I could change a few things there. So, but I feel good about it now, of course, because all these teams are worthy, as we've talked about. So, all right, quickly, Princeton, UNCW, Indiana State. Do those three not being in the top two surprise you?
Princeton, maybe. I love that team offensively. Peters is, he's the brother of, I'm blanking on names. Pierce is the brother of Colts wide receiver Alec Pierce, Caden Pierce. I couldn't think of his first name. 6'6" and averages nearly 10 rebounds a game. Plays ultra physical. They a lot of times like to use him similarly to how they used Ed Bowman last year, where he kind of catches the ball in the middle, similar to what Indiana State does with Avila, and then they run the offense through him, whether he's attacking and kicking out or running dribble handoff type action. This Princeton team offensively with Lee, Pierce, Peters is a great shooter. They just have so many weapons, either from the perimeter or to get to the paint. Defensively, they definitely have to make strides, but offensively, they can score on anybody. And the exact same thing can be said about Indiana State as well.
All right. Last two. So, and by the way, comment on UCW quickly. The CAA could get screwed if the committee does not feel like, if it's not Drexel, like Drexel probably gets the same treatment if they run the table almost entirely through the regular season. Like Charleston got the 12 last year. Did I get that right? 12? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Charleston got the 12 last year, and they were like incredible in a 30-win team, right? So it's like, the CAA could really use an 11, but I don't think that happens. So if UNCW gets like the 14-15, I could see that being a problem for them, but they've played tough teams. Like I think they could hold their own. I just hope the CAA, for the respect of the league that we feel it has, should get a 12 or 13. I just wouldn't be shocked if they don't. That's kind of my issue there.
Yeah, I would think surely they do. That those top six, if it's any of those top six, that just with the depth of the top six, that their resumes are going to be decent by the end of the year when half of your league is, pretty quality competition.
I just know how we've seen enough of these where it's like, oh my God, what happened there? All right, yeah. Last two. The reason I and these two, just for preface, the root of this idea is last year the pretty pick was Charleston, right? And then a lot of us, it was Furman, right? A lot of us that was just below Charleston as a pretty pick. We should all feel good about Furman. That was a great choice. I think these two, whenever on March, whatever the day is, again, I can't remember when the brackets come out. When that date happens, people that night are going to be throwing their content around, and they're going to be like, James Madison and Grand Canyon, in that order for me, 2-1, are going to be everyone's pretty picks. Like, that's just going to be, out of all the teams we went through, I don't see any other team. That's why I gave you the honorable mentions first. But these are going to be everyone's pretty picks. James Madison, especially on that win streak earlier in the year, if you were in on them, you were in on them. There was no in between. There were a lot of doubters, and their only loss is Southern Miss at Southern Miss, which is a very low-key, like, sneaky place, like, hard to play in a cool, like, dome environment. And then App State, who we've already established is obviously one of the other best teams in their conference. So, James Madison, Grand Canyon, you said Ridley. Was there something that surprised you, or is there somebody I just omitted?
No. I guess I just hadn't done, the list in my head of thinking like, okay, who's going to be left?
Right.
My team, of the list that you gave of like one bid leagues, Princeton is who I'd put at number one, but I don't blame you for having Grand Canyon right in there, and then James Madison as well. For James Madison, I worry a little bit, did you peak too soon? Already a couple losses into the season. Now you almost throw away hopes of an at-large berth. And App State, is nearly even with them. Haven't already beat them. You could maybe make the argument that they're better. But yeah, Bickerstaff, Friedel, Edwards, Green, I mean, I really do like this James Madison team. I just don't like them as much as maybe some of the others, like a Princeton or an Indiana State.
Okay. GCU, would you have them like is top? I mean, 3 fair still. I mean, that's everyone. I promise you. I've had enough conversations. When the bracket comes out, everyone's going to be like, especially if it's a 5 or like 5-12 or whatever. I mean, if they play a team like, I don't know, give me any like middle tier team like an 8, like last year Miami was the 5 seed, right? Obviously they were better than that, but somebody who maybe slipped down some, who maybe isn't playing the greatest ball at the time, like maybe a Big East team like that. If somebody slips into 5 there and Grand Canyon gets them, they're in trouble, big time.
To be honest, I the conferences that I know I'm not going to go to, I haven't watched as much, so I'm not watching a ton of the WAC. But what I have watched the Grand Canyon, I have been very impressed.
Yeah, of course.
And I love their balance. I mean, top 75 in the country in both KenPom offensive and defensive efficiency. Yep. Bryce Drew can coach, and they're starting to kind of dominate the WAC and become the team to beat in that conference year over year. And he's going to be a guy that, is going to be on a lot of Power 6 target lists for, hey, let's get this guy an interview.
Maybe even DePaul. Yes. Grand Canyon, you made a great point. That really, though, like, you don't have to watch them early this year, like, to see what their stride will end up being. They beat San Diego State at home in one of the best environments in a long time out there. And then their only loss, really, in non-con, those are the 2 best teams they played is San Diego State, and then they lost to South Carolina on a neutral court, 75-68. That was it. Those are the only 2 teams that I would say like gave them a challenge this year, outside of their league, of course.
I mean, sorry to just before you conclude. No, they and Princeton, I think, have a decent shot at, if you continue to dominate in the regular season and slip up in the conference championship, they could maybe get at-large berths, Grand Canyon and Princeton, but it's going to take dominance in the regular season.
And they are capable of it. I like that point. I think just quickly, the teams I feel lower on that I probably shouldn't is App State. Obviously, I mentioned the head-to-head with James Madison. You made a great point there. James Madison's just deep. Like, I'm telling you, like a team that isn't deep, like, I'm not saying they'd play Kansas. I keep using them as the cop-out example, but, like, even Baylor, like, I don't think Baylor's that deep. They're really not. And if James Madison plays them, they're going to be able to out-tire and outwork Baylor. Like, that's just a team that, like, they play 9 deep, and they're incredible. I don't have a way to get to see James Madison this year, so I'm going to have to trust people like Sunbelt Syndicate, who cover that league ad nauseum extensively. So, but they're just an incredible team, off and on the court, like up and down the court when it comes to both sides, like you mentioned with KenPom there. And then, UC Santa Barbara feels high, but I made this list last night, and I like the talent enough. I've already laid their case out. So, any parting thoughts? Any team we might not have mentioned? Anybody you're excited to see that you haven't? Anything on the journey here? And then let people know where they can find you as we get out of here.
Yeah, I guess just parting thoughts would be, outside of UConn and Purdue, I believe those 2 are very for real. I'm not convinced anyone else is super for real. So because of that, I think this is a year, and we've got a really strong grouping of mid-major teams where it could be a hectic, chaotic Thursday, Friday, maybe into that Saturday and Sunday, and perhaps even into the second weekend of mid-majors ruining brackets, Cinderellas running through. I think we're poised and set up to have a heavy Cinderella type of year. And maybe that's just wishful thinking for my brand, but I would love it.
It's the whole reason you're here. I completely agree with you. So I guess parting thought would be, or parting question would be, who do you have? You mentioned UConn, Purdue. I start asking people late January, early February, anytime I have a guest on, who wins the national championship right now. I know it's hard to do with the Final Fours. I don't like making Final Four picks without a bracket, but you could make a national championship pick, right? Who wins the national championship? And then I guess, did you really ever say like who Cinderella is right now? I know that the jury's not out there yet. You still have teams to see, but
no, Princeton's my number 1 team to be a Cinderella. I think it would be so cool. Can you imagine consecutive Sweet 16 runs, from a team that's 13, 12 seed type?
They were 15 last year, weren't they? Right? Because they beat
Arizona. 15 last year, but for
even
this
more
year,
impressive
I think 13, 12 seed type. And who knows, if they keep dominating, they may climb to a 9-8 seed range if they win the conference. If they don't lose again, they could be a 7-8 type seed, I think.
Love it. And then national champion?
National champion, I'm going to go Purdue. I'm like I told you, I'm a big believer in the storyline type of
Yeah.
things. Losing to 16-1, they're going to remember that. And Zach Edey, geez, is he tough to stop? And the others behind him have a little bit more experience now.
All right, let people know where you're going to be going the next couple of weeks and then where they can find you, and I'll get you out of here.
Yeah, I'll be going all over. So, primarily in the Northeast, though, New York area. But Sharpshot Select on TikTok and on Twitter. I post recaps of the games, previews. I've partnered with Shot Quality now. And so they give me access to great data that I'll be sharing those insights along on Twitter and TikTok as well.
Love it. I appreciate the time once again. I know I asked for 30. We went way over that, so I appreciate you.
Completely fine.
As always, I don't know where I'm going to be for the tournament, but I hope to see you if I can. And if not, enjoy the tournament. And I appreciate it again for having you.
Love talking ball. Thanks, Trevor. Appreciate it.